Hello Corkies! Every once in a while you'll get a bottle of wine that just isn't right. Today we're going to discuss the top 5 most common wine defects and tell you how to spot and avoid them, so stay tuned.
Hello everybody, I am Billy and this is Bryn from corkandjava.com. We're all supposed to enjoy and find fascination in even the simplest things in life. And to do that, we're going to provide you with the tools and techniques required to enhance and enrich your experience with all of your favorite beverages. We're here to do wine, beer, liquor, reviews, and how-tos. And today we're going to be teaching you the top 5 faults or defects that you may encounter in your wine experience. And we're going to teach you how to avoid them and detect them. So here we go. Number 1, you've probably heard this one before, and it's often overdiagnosed. It is called corked.
Right, so have you ever had a wine that smells like wet newspapers or like a damp basement?
Yeah, or just dusty kind of smell in general.
Yeah.
Those are the indicators that your wine might be corked. And what corked is, it's actually a phenomenon that happens naturally if the cork, which is a plant-based material, comes from a tree, is exposed to chlorine, which is a sterilization chemical that is typically used in a lot of places. When those two can get together, sometimes it can lead to that nasty wet newspaper, almost like wet dog kind of smell that you can get in a wine, and it's all from a chemical that's created between the cork and chlorine compounds. But another trick to tell that your wine is corked, because like all of the different defects or faults that we'll be sharing with you today, they range in severity. So they can, I guarantee you've had a wine that's had one of these defects and you didn't know it, because it can vary into where you don't notice it at all to where the wine is completely undrinkable. But one thing to do, one little hack to help you determine if a wine is corked, if that's what you suspect, is to actually take the cork itself and to smell the cork where it is, where it was touching the wine. Because if it was corked, that intensity of that musty, just dank, wet newspaper basement smell is going to be concentrated right there at the cork. So that's a good way to tell if your wine is truly corked. And if that's not the case, maybe it's one of our other defects that we'll be sharing. But before we get into the next one, we're going to start drinking some wine too. We're doing the Sonoma County Merlot here. And I think we picked it up at Lidl, I want to say.
Yeah, this is another cheap Lidl wine that was between like $5 and $10 probably.
So yeah, let me pop this open real quick, because I don't want to keep going without enjoying a little bit of some wine myself. And maybe if we're lucky, it'll have a defect that we can share.
If we're lucky.
The cork smells fine. It's not corked. It's really only about 3% of wines globally that are corked. So if you're experiencing a defect in your wine, it might be corked. It's a 3% chance globally, but could be one of the other ones. What is the second defect that we are going to share today?
The second wine defect could be oxidation.
Oxidation. That is a common one, especially if you're one to visit somebody who has left their wine opened for a long time. You'll experience oxidation.
We have many firsthand experiences with that.
So oxidation could actually happen at any point from the manufacturer all the way through at your own home, depending on bad storage practices and such. But essentially what oxidation is the wine has been exposed to too much oxygen for too long of a period of time. And it can happen through seepage through the cork. It can happen just bad winemaking practices that incorporated too much oxygen into the wine. as well as the classic, just having a bottle that's just been out too long, or it's been, maybe you put the cork back and put it back in the fridge, but you forgot it for 4 or 5 days or longer, and it's going to experience oxidation.
In whites, it may look ruddy and brown and give off a smell of, sherry or cider. And then with reds, it can be like a brick red or orange, just kind of muddy, ruddy color, and just not have any flavor profile to it.
Mm-hmm. And the more it's oxidized too, you'll start to get it will be vinegar characteristics, because the wine is literally turning to vinegar the more oxygen that's incorporated into it.
Do you want to take a second to talk about this one?
Sure.
Your thoughts on the Mist Moon Merlot from Sonoma County?
So it is fairly medium bodied. It's got a nice tannin structure to it. It's very fruit forward, but it's got a lot of vanilla, creamy oak characteristics on the back end, which are pretty nice.
I was actually pleasantly surprised that it does kind of have more profile to it than I was expecting for our typical cheap Lidl wines. Like, it is a little bit oaky, and it is
still very
fruity.
Blueberry, blackberry, cherry
Yeah.
are the top ones that I'm getting on here.
Yeah, it's nice.
Yeah. So what is our third wine fault that we'll be talking about?
Over the hill.
Over the hill. That just means you've aged the wine too long. There's a lot of wine that benefits from aging, such as Bordeaux's, where if you open them young, they have more fruit forward kind of characteristics, even though they're an old world style wine. But a lot of them are meant, if you age them for a while, for a number of years, the secondary flavors start to come out as the primary fruit flavors start to diminish. So you'll get more kind of woody, more tobacco notes, that kind of stuff. And this defect is actually kind of controversial because it's completely personal. Some people will enjoy an over-aged wine, even though it's not really meant to be aged very long. The majority of the wines that you're getting aren't meant to be aged for a long time. Most are ready to drink right off the shelf, believe it or not, or really are aged well within 6 months to a year.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's only certain wines, and you want to do your research if you're going to be aging wine of which ones really benefit the most from aging a long time. So some of the characteristics that you'll get from a wine that you've aged too long, and is for the over the hill defect, is it just kind of gets flat. It's kind of lost a lot of its character. It's not very complex. You'll notice it just diminishes very rapidly.
All right, so our fourth wine defect is cooked.
Cooked,
What
and
is
it's kind of just like it sounds, and means the wine was heated up too much, whether it be in the trunk of your car, on a dock, like in shipping. It could be, a Chianti that's stored on top of the pizza oven at the restaurant. No matter what it is, it's just the wine got too hot.
Mm-hmm.
And it actually began to change the chemical characteristics inside, and that's what they call cooked. And some things you can look out for on cooked wines is sometimes the cork is slightly sticking out to way sticking out of the wine, and that just means pressure is really built up in there from the wine getting very hot, and it started to push the cork out. So that's one clue that you might have cooked your wine, especially if you're bringing it into your home from the hot car or something like that. It's something to look out for. But some flavor characteristics, you'll notice like kind of a toasted nutty flavor, some like prunes and raisins, just stuff that's not characteristics. I mean, there's some wines that naturally have those flavors in them, but like if it's not something that you're expecting from like your Merlot or Cabernet Sauvignon, you're like, what? Where am I getting this like nutty raisiny thing from? Or your Chianti, that might be what it is. It might have got cooked somewhere along the process of the wine being in the bottle and getting too hot.
Right, so what is the optimal temperature then to keep your wine to prevent it from getting too hot?
So
for storing purposes.
So we have a great video. If you're on the blog right now, I'll link to it, that has our 7 tips for storing wine. But as far as temperature, you want it anywhere from room temperature down to cellar temperature. So anywhere from like 75 degrees down to 55 degrees. And if you have any kind of humidity control, that'll help too. But more than like what perfect temperature in that range you're going for, it's more important to keep fluctuations in temperature. That's another thing that we mentioned in our wine storage tip video.
All right, and our final wine fault is reduction.
Yes, I have never actually personally experienced this fault. I've experienced all of the other ones before at some point. Not too often, but this one is called reduction, and it's the opposite of oxidation. If there wasn't enough wine incorporated or enough oxygen incorporated into the wine during the winemaking process, a lot of winemakers try to reduce oxygen levels to try to get really fruit bombs, like get a lot of fruit forward flavors. But if they go too much, then you can not have enough oxygen and you can get flavors, and you'll recognize them if you get them. It's like kind of spoiled eggs, kind of really just sulfurish smells. What other kind of smells would you get from reduction?
I think rubber and garlic and like really potent
and like if you know the like a match kind of strike smell, like when you first strike the match, not when you blow it out and you have the wood, that kind of smells nice. But
I actually love
that. Like the match striking smell, like if you're getting those things in your wine, then you probably have the fault of reduction. But luckily, this one is very easy to mitigate. If you run into this, all you got to do is let your wine breathe for a while. You can put it in a decanter for 30 minutes and just let the oxygen incorporate, and a lot of those smells will dissipate away, and usually, from what I've read, be removed completely out of the wine once enough oxygen is brought back.
Restored back into it. Okay.
Yeah, so that one's not terrible. And there's one thing that I wanted to mention with wine faults. A lot of people think it's a fault, but it's really not. And that's like sediment in the wine. And sometimes you'll pour your wine, and by the end, you get these like little crystal kind of sand-like.
The dregs,
in there. And especially with wines that you have aged for a while, but that's just a result of different chemicals in the wine combining together and falling out as the sediment. It's completely harmless to drink, and if you're not a fan of it, which a lot of people aren't, we talk about it in our decanter video. I'll link to that one as well. You can use a decanter, and that if you have a mesh screen like one of ours, if we're going to do one that we know has sediment in it, that can remove it, as well as doing a special pour slowly out of the bottle to make sure the sediment stays in the bottle. And a lot of decanters as well will be shaped in a way to where it lets the sediment stay in the decanter and just fall out to where you're not really pouring much sediment into your glass from the decanter.
All right, leave a comment below if you have experienced any of those 5 wine faults. Just tell us your story. We want to hear about which fault you had experienced and what you did. If you like my shirt, if you're a wine and true crime fan, I'll leave a link in the description so you can get your own t-shirt. Make sure that you guys find us on Facebook, Pinterest, and Twitter. We've got great community and great people and great content on there. We're looking forward to seeing you guys online. So until next time, bottoms up.
Thumbs up.